If you've got an ADHD brain, you already know that silence, yeah, it's rarely actually peaceful. In fact, total silence often makes every tiny random distraction feel infinitely louder. I mean, suddenly the hum of your refrigerator sounds like a jet engine. A passing car outside breaks your entire train of thought. Or, an uninvited thought suddenly pops up, which is then immediately followed by a second thought arguing with the first one. For a lot of us, the real issue isn't that there's too much noise in the room. The actual problem is a total lack of the right kind of sound to anchor the brain.
So welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a genuinely fascinating intersection of neurodiversity and sensory regulation. We're going to look really closely at how auditory tools, specifically ASMR and sound therapy, can serve as incredibly practical, non-medical aids for managing ADHD symptoms. We'll unpack the science behind background noise, look at how different brains process sensory input, and ultimately give you a structured, easy way to test these tools out for yourself.
All right, let's jump right into section 1, why silence is loud and the paradox of ADHD and attention. Let's talk about the reality of how attention actually works.
Okay, we need to dismantle the biggest myth about ADHD right out of the gate. ADHD is not simply a matter of not paying attention. Absolutely not. It is fundamentally an issue of attention regulation. Your attention might be way too scattered, just jumping from one thing to the next like a bunch of arrows shooting off in every possible direction. Or, on the flip side, it might be way too sticky, latching onto something and completely refusing to let go. It might be intensely reward-driven or just incredibly hard to shift from one state to another. A lot of folks with ADHD live this crazy paradox every single day. It can feel almost physically impossible to start a boring administrative task, right? But the second your brain locks onto a highly interesting topic, boom, a state of intense hyperfocus takes over and literally hours just disappear.
Moving on to section 2, how sound regulates attention, or the science of noise. So, how exactly do we bridge that gap?
What's really fascinating here is the scientific concept called stochastic resonance. Research led by Soderlund and his colleagues, starting way back in 2007, highlights this phenomenon perfectly. Think of your brain like an old-school radio dial. If you have total silence, there's no signal to latch onto, which makes an ADHD brain restless. If you have chaotic, unpredictable noise, well, that's just overwhelming and ruins your focus. But, and here's the magic, if you introduce a moderate, predictable background sound, it actually helps the nervous system tune in. It improves cognitive performance and signal detection for some people with ADHD. Basically, the brain uses that moderate noise to stabilize its own focus.
Fast forward to today, and the scientific community is actively measuring these exact effects. A 2024 systematic review and meta-analysis published in the Journal of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry looked specifically at this. And what they found was that white and pink noise actually demonstrated small but meaningful benefits on laboratory attention tasks for people with ADHD or high ADHD symptoms. Now, small does not mean meaningless. It just means it isn't magic, but it is a scientifically measurable, highly useful tool for the right person.
Which brings us to a major cultural shift in section 3, ASMR versus white noise and matching the sound to the brain. We know white noise has solid data behind it, but how does traditional sound therapy compare with internet culture's massive ASMR phenomenon?
If we contrast the two, the differences are pretty striking. White noise is steady, static, and entirely neutral. It's essentially just a blanket of sound. ASMR, on the other hand, is patterned. It's often human-generated, and it is incredibly sensory-rich. We're talking whispers, soft talking, brushing sounds, page-turning, or rhythmic tapping. And this is exactly why a sensory-rich ASMR video could be a total game-changer for one specific task, but an absolute nightmare of a distraction for another. Think about it. If you're trying to write a really complex email, getting lost in a highly detailed 45-minute ASMR roleplay of someone pretending to be your optometrist might completely steal your attention. But if you're doing repetitive, boring chores like folding laundry, that soft-spoken companionship might be the exact level of stimulation you need to just keep moving. And there is solid science backing the regulatory power of ASMR too. A 2018 study published in PLOS One by Poiriero and colleagues showed that people who experience ASMR had improved affect, which basically just means a better mood, and a significantly reduced heart rate while watching ASMR videos. This strongly supports the idea of a relaxation and physiological regulation pathway. The sound is quite literally communicating safety and calm directly to your nervous system.
But you might be wondering, why doesn't it work for everyone? Well,
A 2021 study in the Journal of Personality provides the clue. They found that people who have stronger ASMR experiences also tend to report heightened sensory sensitivity and greater bodily awareness. And this beautifully explains why ASMR effectiveness varies so wildly from person to person. It is highly dependent on your individual sensory profile. What feels like the absolute perfect, soothing focus aid to you might feel like nails on a chalkboard to a friend with a different sensory baseline.
To make all of this practical, we really need to organize how we use these sounds. So, Section 4, Focus, Transitions, and Stimming, or the 3 categories of ASMR.
Let's see how we can actually build a functional toolkit out of this. We can break ASMR down into 3 distinct use cases for ADHD. First up, focus support. Now here, the goal is not getting those famous ASMR tingles. Actually, the goal is just establishing a stable sensory floor so you can work. You want low-complexity triggers, no dramatic stories, no sudden loud sounds. Just think of rain-like tapping or slow brushing. Second, transition support. We know ADHD brains really struggle to switch gears, like from scrolling on your phone to sleeping or from work to rest. Well, ASMR can act as a transition ritual. Playing the exact same 10-minute video every single time you shift tasks tells your nervous system through repetition, okay, we are changing modes now. And third, emotional regulation. When the day feels just a bit too sharp and your emotional intensity is running high, a gentle, predictable, non-demanding ASMR video gives your brain something soft to hold on to. It doesn't require you to perform or converse or solve any problems.
To understand why this works on such a deep level, we absolutely have to talk about stimming. Stimming stands for self-stimulatory behavior. It involves any repeated movement, sound, touch, or sensation used specifically to regulate your nervous system. Now, while it's most frequently discussed in the context of autism, it is incredibly common in ADHD. If you ever find yourself constantly clicking pens, bouncing your leg, rocking in your chair, rubbing the edge of your shirt, or, seeking out deep physical pressure, you are stimming. You're doing it to regulate your focus and arousal levels.
So here is the huge light bulb moment. ASMR can actually be understood as a form of external stimming. It acts as external sensory regulation. Instead of you having to spend unconscious energy bouncing your leg or clicking a pen to generate that repetitive input, you receive it passively from the audio. A predictable tapping sequence or a whisper pattern serves that exact same deep regulatory purpose. It completely satisfies the nervous system's need for stimulation, so your conscious mind can finally just focus on the task in front of you.
Now we pivot to the actionable part of this explainer. Section 5, your safe ASMR experiment and finding your sensory profile.
Okay, before we test this, we really must state this clearly and firmly. ASMR is a fantastic complementary tool, but it is not a medical treatment. It doesn't cure ADHD, and it absolutely does not replace professional diagnoses, prescribed medication, specialized therapy, or ADHD coaching. Always keep this boundary in mind, right? We are exploring a wellness and productivity tool here, not clinical medicine. So here is your safe experiment. We like to call this the Start, Stay, Calm metric. Step 1. Choose just one single task type, maybe something like clearing out your inbox, and one specific ASMR style, like keyboard typing sounds. Step 2. Test it for 3 sessions only. And crucially, keep the volume low. You really don't want to overwhelm your nervous system. Step 3. After each session, just rate the experience from 1 to 5 on 3 simple questions. Did it help me start the task? Did it help me stay on the task? And did it help me feel calmer? Once you've got your scores, you can use this little diagnostic matrix. Look, the ADHD brain is notorious for feeling like it's completely failing if a productivity hack doesn't work perfectly on the first try. But the goal here isn't to force ASMR to make you a productivity machine. It's just to build a personalized sensory menu. If a sound helps you start a task, but eventually distracts you from staying on it, that's fine. Just use it as a launch cue. Turn it off once you're in the zone. If it helps you calm down but absolutely ruins your focus, then guess what? That sound belongs in your break time category. And if it puts you to sleep but ruins your work, please stop trying to force it into your workday to finish that massive spreadsheet. Just let it be for rest. At the end of the day, ASMR might just be the gentle, predictable rhythm your brain has been desperately looking for to reduce friction. But ultimately, the best trigger isn't the one with the most views on the internet. It's the one that genuinely helps your specific nervous system. Which leaves us with this final question for you to reflect on. When you really need to focus, what helps your brain the most? Is it total silence, the steady hum of white or brown noise, your favorite music, or the sensory richness of ASMR? Take the time to run the experiment, listen to what your brain responds to, and build your own sensory toolkit. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.